Welcome to Charting Change in Legal. I am Ari Kaplan. I'm an analyst who covers the legal industry, and I'm here with my co-host.
Caroline Hill. Hi, everyone. I'm the editor-in-chief of Legal IT Insider. I'm a journalist based in the UK. Great to see you, Ari, as always.
Great to see you. I have to acknowledge the fact that this is actually episode 48.
Wow.
And
What are
at
we going to
some,
do for the big 5-0?
I think
Oh.
for the Big 50, we're going to try to get some listeners. Maybe
Oh.
that. Well, it's been a busy month. It's been certainly a busy few weeks since the last time we spoke. You and I have been actively at various events, trying to wrap up the rest of the year with I think, some perspectives on where we've been and where we're headed. So, how are things?
Yeah, well, that was a great segue intro. Yeah, so it's conference season. I don't know if it's ever not conference season, but it's conference season. So it's never not, is it? But it's autumn conference season, and it's pretty intense. So, we've got Legal Geek coming up. You've got a lot of user conferences, and also I went to two conferences last week. One was a 2-day event, which was a kind of stay over thing, which was high level CIOs, COOs. It was called Vis-a-Vis. They've resurrected it for the first time. They last ran it in 2022. And then I also went to in London a day event called London Law Expo, which is run by Netlaw Media, which is the company behind the British Legal Technology Forum. It's a different type of event because it's more for COOs. It's more operational, perhaps. But yeah, they were both great, and I mean, we can dip in and out of depending on. Won't talk for ages, but we can come back to it. But it was just interesting. The I think Expo was more techie, which is great. There was some great talks by Workday with CMS talking about how they're using Workday, which was interesting to have. I really love when you have the client perspective, rather than just one perspective. Um, and so the end user. But then vis-a-vis, what was really interesting was how people focused it was. You and I have talked about things like this many a time, but the content, there was a heavy emphasis on networking and spending time with people. They deliberately built a lot of time to network. But then the content was very much talking about, I mean, it's not a surprise, but change, people, leadership, how to get the best out of people, how to cope with your day, how to build stuff into your diary. There was a talk from a guy, Rob O'Donoghue from Gartner, talking about the habits of leaders. He was kind of riffing off the Seven Habits of Leaders book. And he was saying 7 habits is not enough these days. And he said that you really need to create, he was talking about a culture of empathy. And he was talking about being authentic. He was talking about enabling people to be vulnerable, about being able to be vulnerable, and creating a culture where you really embrace failure rather than saying you embrace failure and then actually underneath you don't embrace failure. There was so much around the cultural piece and I think that's what people, the senior leaders, really want to hear right now. I don't know if that resonates with anything you've been hearing recently.
Well, I'm about to release several different reports. One that I just finished about law firm leaders at mid-sized law firms. Another one focused on how legal AI is being used, what perspectives on there. And I think that in addition to what you just mentioned, all of which are very important points, there needs to be a practical element to it because I don't know that leaders struggle with the concept of allowing for failure, but it's more about what does that actually look like in practice. I feel like the practical side of a lot of theoretical issues are now very much part of the conversation. For example, I just returned from Relativity Fest, and I think it was a great event. As always, I have been, I forget when the first Relativity Fest I attended was, but it was at least 10 years ago. And they just do a great job. They really embrace the community, and they're always on the edge of lots of different issues. I'm lucky to get to speak about several things, one of which is about some research that I did about litigators at large firms, but also general counsel around the world. And pricing came up. Like, how are we using the conversations about how do you use AI in general or generative AI, or what are you thinking about agentic AI was obviously part of the conversation, but the big announcements were about what are you paying for? How are you paying for it? So the practical elements of should we build it in? Will it be built into this platform? Which was one of the announcements. And other companies started to also mention this is what we're doing about pricing because while innovation and driving change with AI are all super important topics to all the leaders that you and I are lucky to speak to, who's paying for it? How do we pay for it? What's the practical side of failure? And how much failure is too much failure? And how much is enough that shows what our culture is? Those are really important questions. And when we sit down and talk to folks, and when they sit down with their other leaders and their constituents and stakeholders, what it means really matters. And so I think it's been an interesting evolution of the conversation.
Who is, so that's fascinating. So who was making the pricing announcements?
A
So that
Relativity made a pricing announcement about Air and its subscriptions, and
yeah,
then other vendors who provide Relativity to their clients made announcements about pricing. So there were
and that was
several.
different to stuff that we've seen before because it's interesting because the conversations around pricing I have a lot of the time are around the end user, and it comes back to the billable hour and what it means, and clients getting involved, and this is this is the vendors what being more
Well,
transparent.
this is the question. So, the questions that we both get, which
Mm.
are kind of twofold, is the end of the billable hour, how do we value a particular project? Also, the questions that I'm getting are who's going to pay for this cost of this tool that I am now using? Is it a pass-through cost? It was, there was a time once where firms would regularly bill for additional items like faxes or mail or research, et cetera, research tools themselves. Now, lots of that's just built into overhead. And that's what the conversation was more about now. And I'm just noticing that how are you going to pay for it? Let's remove some of these conversations about pricing and let's just get to the benefits and the innovation and driving change. So there were a lot of interesting conversations about that, and that was pretty big news. In addition to all the great developments that are taking place, right? The technology continues to develop and expand and offer opportunities for change, but the practical side was really interesting to hear about.
Yeah, I love that. I love that. And that's I think going back to the workday conversation, with CMS, and I'm seeing in continuing that vein of big mainstream providers being very visible in the sector. That's been quite an interesting trend. And yeah, those very practical conversations, which I'm trying to have more and more with people. I have to say, so I had a bit of a hissy fit over LinkedIn about people not being prepared to come. You speak to people, Ari, for your research, and I'd love to come back to your AI research actually. But and you wouldn't dream of producing a report without speaking to people, but because it's a busy period and there's been lots of press releases, and so I'm really stressing the need to have those conversations, to really speak, to be careful about not just producing a ton of content without actually having the conversations, including hopefully with the end user, to talk about these really important conversations about how are you using it, what are you finding, because we're kind of done with those days of, hey, it's Gen AI, yeah, we're using it. Although, still think there's some marketing going on.
Well, there's also a spectrum of users that are quite experienced and those who are still at the very early stages. I mean, I'm lucky I'm going to go to the knowledge management and innovation conference that Patrick DiDomenico created with Josh Fireman several years ago, and they're gonna. I'm sure these are going to come up. This sort of draws the innovation and knowledge management leaders from around the world now in New York, and so I'm looking forward to hearing not just the use cases because we have been hearing about the use cases from the very top organizations for a couple of years now, but just to hear how that's proliferated among
Yeah.
their teams and among their peers, and especially among people in the audience who aren't necessarily on the stage, who are grappling with different issues than those who have really figured it out. And I love those kind of
Yeah.
get-togethers because it's honest and sincere and really authentic.
I hosted a dinner last week. I have to say, last week nearly killed me. But anyway, so I went to two conferences and hosted a dinner. Um, but yeah, the conversation around, I had CIOs around the dinner table. It was really fun actually. And it was talking, we focused a lot on adoption and the kind of all the next questions around adoption. What, what's working, what's not working. There's, to be honest, there's still some conversations which are being had again. It's not just all evolution and next thing, it's still retreading some of the stuff about what are the strategies? Are you finding high adoption amongst the more senior partners? It's quite varied, actually. Quite the conversations I'm having. There's one or two firms that are saying we've got really widespread adoption, including with the partners. Those are the firms that have spent a lot of time and effort in training and been quite forceful, perhaps, or maybe forceful is not the right word, but they've made a lot of effort, But still, a lot of firms are saying our partners, it's just not for them. I don't see this mass change, in that sense. But yeah, having those great, honest, you know, sometimes on background conversations is proving really helpful just to track. And it's interesting because it's gone from very theoretical to, like you said, the word practical. It's gone from very theoretical to very practical. What's working, and oh, hey, I've got this, and this really worked in terms of education and training, and so that's really great to be involved
Yeah,
in.
sort of what prompt did you use? How did you iterate on that
Mm.
prompt? How much time did it take? What did you do with that extra time? That's another conversation. Is like, what are people doing with the extra time? If you had an extra 5 hours in your day, how would you spend it? If you had an extra 1 hour, if it was just 30 minutes, was that just like getting lunch or spending an extra time on a break? Which isn't, I should point out, that's not necessarily a bad thing to take an extra 30 minutes for yourself. You and I have been on the road a little bit, whether it's locally or traveling, and the focus on wellness is really crucial when you're on these multiple day exercises. You fly in. I mean, I certainly know for myself, I usually take a 6 a.m. or something super early to try to maximize any kind of travel benefits, the time where I am, and then I'll sometimes take a late flight home to also maximize the day, almost like a vacation, except it isn't. And it's really important. I remember sitting at a dinner at an event, and I was sitting next to someone, and it was getting kind of late. Dessert hadn't come out yet, but we had a great, it was just a great event. But I said to him, "What time are you thinking of going back to the hotel?" And he's like, "Well, I'll go back whenever you go back." And I thought, okay. And I just stood up and he laughed and we both just said thank you to everyone and wasn't abrupt or anything. People were chatting. So it wasn't as much of them missing us. It was just an issue of just trying to leave so we could get some sleep. We also both had to prepare for something for the next day. And it was just really funny. I think people need to try to know their own strengths and weaknesses at those kinds of things as best they can. I also people know that I run at a lot of these events. I try to encourage others to run. And so if I'm going to get up at 6:30 or 6 o'clock or 5:30 on one of those days, you need to just focus on some sleep, some rest, and make sure that you're maximizing by being, your best self at these things.
Which is what I do, Ari.
I
That's
know
what
you
I
do. I know.
do. I go to bed at a sensible time. Not No, I did not do that. This week I did not do that any one night. Stayed out late every night, and I'm much too old for it. And by Sunday, when it was my friend's birthday, I was like a frazzle. Everyone's like, "What's wrong with you?" I was to twitch in my eyebrow. I need to just get a grip and get some balance. Because you're right, you can't be everywhere all the time. I lawyers talk about FOMO. Some of the best strategies people have around technology adoption is FOMO. Well, I can relate to that because I have FOMO and I just don't want to leave. But
Yeah.
but well-being keeps coming up. So uh two things I've hosted. Actually, no, one thing I hosted and one thing I spoke to a firm. They stressed well-being in terms of the benefits of this new technology, different technologies, different But both Gen in the Gen AI space, they're talking about this the ROI being giving people back time to enable them. One example given was to get home and put their children to bed. I am a big cynic about all of this. I love the idea of this. I love the idea that we're going to be giving people back time and that we're going to be using that to focus on our kids. I don't know why I'm really cynical. I just think, is that going to actually last, or is it just going to be because we do what we do? It's just going to be taken up with more work. And how do you protect against that culturally? Because that is a big shift. It's not just tech. That is like, how did you affect that? I mean, I'm not doubting actually. I have to say. So one of the firms I spoke to, it's a UK firm, Brown Jacobson. I spoke to their COO, Abby Ewan, who I like very much and who I respect very much, and she said that there's been a well-being uplift through their adoption of Legora, which so, and I'm not doubting it. But it's just curious as to how you maintain that, long term, when there's this culture and this work ethic in law firms that has made them become the hugely successful enterprises that they are, right? So yeah, I'm just curious. I think it's a great thing if we can make it last. I need to do more of that.
There is a fundamental base on which that needs to be built, and that's being optimally productive. So I'm always talking about a book called Atomic Habits by James Clear. I think it's an amazing book. I think it's very an easy read, but the point of if you had more time, would you use it productively is their critical issue because sometimes I'll have a deadline and then I'll get an extension and then I still won't do the thing until the very last minute or until later. And it frustrates me that I haven't really just optimize that extra time or that I didn't even optimize the time in the first place. And so it's the same issue now if technology gives us extra time and we didn't use the time well in the first place, needing the extra time to accomplish what we're trying to do. There's a flaw there in the system that technology is not saving. It's very much our own performance and the productivity that we inject into our work. So I think it's really critical that we address that in a very easy way. There are lots of ways that you can do that, but I think that that's a component that needs to be discussed in addition to the fact that there may be this extra time.
Which I guess comes back to, makes sense when you
Why are we
think about,
whispering?
oh, am I with?
We've started whispering all of a sudden.
I'm saving energy, Ari.
Optimizing, super
I'm
productive. When I'm quieter, I'm much more productive.
becoming very mysterious. So vis-a-vis, that explains some of the content because it's about how do you create a great culture? How do you create an authentic, empathetic culture? How do you, so teaching these leaders how to do things which we've not really necessarily, some people have, but had to think about too much, right? Like it's been I think it's been a progressive thing. So from the days when I practiced, I don't think that leaders would have spent that much time thinking about how to have an authentic and empathetic culture. I think they would have spent a lot of time working out how to make more money, how to cross sell, which was a perennial challenge. How do we do more for our clients, but I think there's been a change, in leadership, and types of priorities, and perhaps that's what will help translate into that end goal of how do we create a better quality of life for people, perhaps.
Yeah, I mean, I think there are the the crux of what we're discussing here is really you can't create an organization that is driving change and building on top of what you've done to achieve remarkable innovations unless the foundational issues of culture and leadership and time management and trust are at the core. It's not unlike why the clients are choosing to work with certain organizations. They feel like they know them. They appreciate them. They can empathize with their situation. They will find the solutions that matter most to them. And I think that reflects really interesting progress. I mean, from the conversations we had in the last 47 episodes to now, I feel like we're really coming full circle in some respects and trying to peel back several layers at once so that we can see what needs to happen and the organizations that have done that and are now kind of solidly building to achieve something better is impressive. I'm excited to see where we're headed with that.
Yeah. Well, maybe we should go back and listen to our first ever episode and see what we were talking about.
I have just found a plan for episode 50. We will listen to the very first one and we will critique ourselves and we'll be like, wow, why were what were we talking about? What was it? We didn't even mention AI one time. That's
We were
unbelievable.
just, I think we probably just laughed. I
I
remember we
think
just were in absolute hysterics, like for one.
I
With
want to just highlight something just for fun that I am going to be at the Association of Corporate Counsel annual meeting next week,
ooh,
and I will be hosting a run sponsored by Level Legal, and we will be running up the Rocky steps and doing the Rocky pose from Rocky One. And so I think that it's in Philadelphia, obviously,
oh
and I
my
just thought it
God.
was such a fun idea that Jill Black came up with, and I'm excited for it. So, I mean, in addition to going to KM and I, so it's a busy week next week, but I just think that's so fun, and I'm looking forward to.
Share a pic and we can share it with
We'll
this
have all kinds of
podcast,
pictures and
right?
a headband, and
Yeah.
yeah, it'll be a lot of fun.
And the
So.
music. You're gonna have the music.
I guess somebody will on their phone have some music, and
You've
it will
got to
just
play
be
it.
a
Uh-huh.
bunch of very dynamic in-house lawyers running up the Rocky Steps. And I will share that with our audience of one. The next the next time we are on Caroline Hill, it just the time just flies by. It's
I know.
really a privilege every single chance we get to catch up, and I appreciate it very much.
Likewise. Have a great week.
Thanks,
Thanks.
everyone.
Thanks, everyone.